All right, so here we are in that demo lesson. And here at the top, we have that start lesson option that I mentioned to you before. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that. And it's going to give me the option when I first click on that, do I want to start as student-paced activity or as an instructor-paced activity? So this is something definitely to keep in mind. If you want students to be able to go through the presentation on their own, maybe as a homework assignment, or if you're already presenting, at the end of the lesson you want to give students the ability to go back and look at other slides, maybe reflect on some of their learning, we're going to click student-paced activity for that. If, however, you are together in real time, whether you are virtual or you're in the physical classroom, you're going to want to select instructor-paced activity. This is important because you don't want students to be getting ahead of the lesson, or you don't want students to be able to go back and maybe edit some of those responses that they've already put in place. So we're going to select instructor-paced activity. It's going to be launching our lesson for us, and you'll see the very first thing that pops up is instructions for my students on how to join the presentation. So they are going to need to go to joinpd.com and enter whatever code is presented. This is unique for this presentation only. If I were to open up this lesson for a new class later on, after I've ended this lesson, there's going to be a different code as well. So we can't have all of our students in one presentation like that. I mean, you could open it up later on, but it will reset itself each and every time you click that Start Lesson option. You'll also see we have the option to give our students a link. So this is a unique link just for this presentation in the same way that the code works. This is a great thing that you can do to share it to Google Classroom if you want to post it. You can also provide the code as well, but you can provide this link so that way students can go right into Google Classroom, click on this link, and have access to the presentation. So right now it's saying that there are no students connected. It's going to be kind of giving you that information. That's something to keep in mind, that if you want your students to be able to make sure that they are all there, you're going to want to make sure that you keep aware of the number of students that you expect to be in a session. So right now we're still waiting for those students. We're actually going to go over to Joe's computer here, and we're going to take a look at what he's seeing while he's accessing this presentation.
All right, so Nikki, I went to joinpd.com. I see the code. It's keen flashlights officiate underwhelmed kangaroos. That's kind of cool. So yeah, Pear Deck gives you that kind of cool code in, what do you call that, an acronym? No, it's not an acronym. What is that? It's something. You know what I'm talking about. But anyway, it gives me this kind of social emotional question to start off. How am I feeling today? It always starts with this. I'm feeling fantastic. So I'm going to click this little happy face. And now it's loading the presentation. And I'm on the title slide, and I'm, looks like I'm waiting for more directions.
So if we head back over to the view that I have, you'll see that now that a student has connected, I can actually start the class. So it won't allow you to start the class if there are no students connected. If I have selected that instructor-paced view. Down here at the bottom, now it's in green. It shows me that one student has connected. That's all who's in our class today. So we're going to go ahead and click Start Class. So you'll see right here, we have the presentation. If we want to go to Joe's screen, we're going to take a look and see what he is seeing as I am going through the presentation. Right now, we are in projector view. So everything that you see on my screen is what's going to be projected for your students. It's very important that when you are doing this presentation with students that you only show them this projector view. So if I go to the next slide, you'll see it also changes for Joe as well. So this is our very first Pear Deck interactive question. What type of matter is in the first bottle? What type of matter is in the second bottle? And then explain your answers. So Joe's going to go ahead and get started typing up his answer.
First bottle is liquid. All right, and type in the box here. And I'm going to, if I add another response, is that going to lose the first one? Oh, yeah, so I've already submitted one. The first bottle is liquid. I'm going to add another one here because the second bottle is gas. Well, there's gas inside. The bottle is a solid. See what I did there, Nikki?
Nice one there, Joe.
And I hit end of the response, and I'm good.
So something that I'd like to point out is, let's say I want to give my students a time for if they'd like to submit their responses. I don't want them to be able to keep editing their response, and I'd like to let them know about approximately how long they have. Now, I could just go ahead and lock their screen right now, but that might stop some students who are typing already from finishing their responses. So an option that I like to have is if I hold down on lock screen, it's going to give me a few different options for length of time for me to lock that screen. So if I hold down on that, you'll see here, I can give my students 30 seconds, 1 minute, or 3 minutes to respond to the question, at which time their screen will lock. So if I click on 30 seconds here, now Joe's at his explanation here. So he's going to go ahead and explain.
All right, so the first bottle has water in it, and water is a liquid. The second bottle is empty, so it is full of gas. 5 seconds. Woohoo! I'm good.
So you'll notice that countdown appears on Joe's screen, and it starts off as green when he has all the time remaining, switches to yellow when the time is a little less, and then when time is getting very urgent, it switches to red. Now it's going to show on Joe's screen, it says your teacher has locked responses for this slide. It's going to show him his responses that he has. On my screen right now, it's not showing any responses. If I wanted to show student responses to the class, I would click down at the bottom here where it says show responses. So if I click on that, it's going to show all of Joe's responses, but the good thing is that it doesn't attach his name to his response as long as we are in that projector view. So right now Joe is seeing what the responses that he submitted. He can also see any other response that students from the class have submitted as well. And something that I love about this is the anonymous factor here. So this is great for some of your shyer students or maybe some students who don't like to take big risks. They can answer their question. Their thoughts are going to be shared with the class, but they don't have to necessarily worry about explaining themselves in front of the class. They're still able to get those thoughts out there. Maybe somebody who wouldn't otherwise volunteer that really great information that they're putting forth.
So Nikki, we had a question in the chat box. These questions or these answers here are all anonymous. Is there a way to see what students submitted what answers?
Yeah, absolutely, Joe. We're going to take a look at that teacher dashboard in a moment. So that's a great question we have there. So when we are in this view here, as we mentioned, it is anonymous. But if me as the teacher, I wanted to see all of my student responses, we would head over to the teacher dashboard. We're not going to do that right at this moment. We're going to finish up here with this presenter view. Something that I'd also like to add is that while I'm in the middle of the live session, I can enable that student paste option. So let's say we've gone through several different slides. I want students to be able to go from whatever slide that they want to, taking a look around. Before we actually do that, this lock screen feature prevents students from changing their answer, even if you switch it to that student paste mode. All right, so to access student paste, we're going to click on that three-dot menu here. If I click on that three-dot menu, you'll see I have that option to turn on student paste. If I click on that, it says your students are in student paste mode. It gives me that option before it switches. So if we're looking at Joe's screen right now, he's going to have the option to scroll through at the bottom. Down at the bottom, he now has these arrows. They were not there before, and he can go through as he chooses. Let's say I don't want students to be on that anymore. I'm going to want to go ahead and stop that student paste right here. It's going to appear at the bottom right, kind of like a little stop sign there. I'm going to stop that student paste, and it's going to bring Joe back to this slide that he was on here before. Now, if he were on another slide, it would bring him again back to this same slide. I don't want my responses anymore, so I'm going to click on that hide responses option, and we're going to get back to that presentation.
It looks like some of our viewers missed that last option. Where exactly did you select that option to stop the student pace? Can you show that one more time?
Absolutely, Joe. So I'm going to go back into that three-dot menu. So here where I have turn on student pace, when I'm ready to go end student pace, it's going to say end student pace in that same exact spot. Thanks for asking that, Joe. All right, so now let's take a look at our dashboard view, or teacher dashboard as it's called. So we have two options here. We can open it in a new window and open it in a new device. I do recommend, if you're doing it live with your students, that you open it in a new device. Again, as I mentioned before, you're going to want to have access to that teacher dashboard and your projector view at the same time, because you are going to want to be able to see what students' answers are coming in. Not necessarily, you might not want to see, again, the student projector view at all times on your particular screen, but students are going to need to see that all the time as well. So if you have it in a separate device, you're able to keep this projector view up uninterrupted all the time, and that way you don't run the risk of showing students other students' answers, because when we do go into this teacher dashboard, it's going to show students' responses attached to their name. So I'm going to select that option to open it in a new window. It's going to pop up a new window here for me. If I go full screen, you'll see I can see all of Joe's responses for that particular slide that we were just on. So any student who is in my class, I would see their response as well. And again, it has their name attached. So we don't want this to be something that we're showing to students on our projector. So as I go through to other slides, right now there's none. It says waiting for responses. On this first slide, we've got a couple responses that we did have before. And if I didn't have any responses, if it was just something normal, it would just appear as a regular slide. So I'm going to head back to that first slide. And before we move on, I'd like to show you some different options for viewing your student responses. So at the top left of the student response section of our teacher dashboard, you'll see we have two different options for viewing. We have a list view, so it kind of looks like a little checklist there. And then we have a grid view, which is a 4-square menu. So if I click on that grid layout, you'll see all of the answers that Joe submitted are side by side. So something that I will point out is when Joe was doing his warm-up, he submitted each one as a new answer. So that shows up for me as a new answer. If you want to make sure that students, you're getting not, a million different responses on this page, you want to make sure you instruct them to write all of their responses within one box and not to keep adding responses for those options.
Nikki, real quick, someone in the chat box mentioned, they asked how they know that was my name, like how does Pear Deck know that was me? And that's a great question. That's because I signed in with my Google account, and because I was signed into Google when I went into Pear Deck, my Google account attached to Pear Deck. So it recognized my Google account, and that's how it's able to tell that that's my answer.
So that's a really great question, Joe. It does bring up for your students when they go to that joinpd.com, same as it would ask me when I'm opening up Pear Deck for myself, what account you'd like to sync it with. So students can select their own account as well, and it'll show up with their name right within that screen. Thanks for asking that. Okay, so something that you do have the option to do as well, we're not going to do it right now, but you can add a new prompt right within the presentation that you're currently doing. So let's say things are not going so great, you kind of want to add a impromptu question to kind of gauge students' understanding. You can add a new prompt there as well. That is a premium feature, so if you're in that basic account view, you're not going to have that option. All right, so now we are ready to end our session. We can either click on the end button here, or if I go into that three-dot menu, we also have the option there to end the session. I'm going to click on end. It's going to ask me to give my session a name. So I'm going to name it States of Matter. And I'm going to want to be specific, 602. So my class section 602. That way, if I have many different lessons, as long as I make it specific, I know when I go back to review it that I'm talking about this particular class. Also at the bottom here, you'll see this option. It says publish student takeaways. So student takeaways are going to be summary responses for each of your students. It's going to open up a Google Doc for each individual student. And it's going to show them all of the answers that they submitted within a lesson. And it also has some reflection questions embedded in there as well. If I didn't want to do that, I would just simply uncheck that. So now I'm ready to go. I'm going to click Save and End Session. When I do that, it's going to provide me that Share Takeaway option with either a link or something I could immediately integrate into Google Classroom. I will note about this, it's not advisable to share this exact link with your students because it's going to bring them to the Google Drive folder where every student's takeaway is stored. So students have the ability to go into each other's takeaways and kind of look at their responses. If you're concerned about privacy, I again would recommend going into each individual student's takeaway and sharing it with that particular student only. Now I'm all ready to go. I'm going to click on Return Home here, and that's going to finalize that closing out process. And I'm going to click Exit down at the bottom there in case it didn't bring us back. So now we're here back in our presentation. We're out of that view, and we're ready to head back to our presentation here. Now finally, how are we going to review that student data after we have the lesson? What's left of all those student responses? How am I going to access them later? So I do have the option to go into reviewing them within the teacher dashboard. I'm going to show you how to do that in a little bit because it's not right within Google Slides. We have to open up separately the Pear Deck app as a separate tab. We also can view each student's takeaways. So those takeaways that I mentioned before, those summary reports, you can go back and view them. Something I definitely like about that is you're able to leave feedback right in that document. If I'm just looking at my teacher dashboard here, I'm not able to leave feedback for my students in that dashboard later on or even at the time when I'm doing the presentation. So that's something very important to keep in mind. Then finally, we're able to export our answers to a spreadsheet. So when it says export our answers to a spreadsheet, what's really happening is it's opening up a Google Sheets spreadsheet for us, which is going to list all of our students' answers, their name as well. So that's something really great to keep. And I really do like that option because it shows all of those responses in one place for my entire class. Whereas the takeaways option, I have to look at each individual student's takeaways. With all of these different options to review our student data, again, we can easily see who is struggling, who is ready for more, and what exactly is confusing them. As I mentioned before, when you're going through the actual lesson itself, you can add those prompts. You can see what students are doing and then ask that question right in the moment. But maybe you didn't catch that. Maybe later on you want to review it. These are great options as well. So I'm going to show you how to access this folder where we can find our student takeaways and how to make that presentation spreadsheet report. All right. So in a separate tab, I have my Pear Deck here. So this is the same app. It's just in a separate tab. If I click on Sessions at the top here, you'll see I'm already there, but that's where I can access any of my archived sessions. So if I wanted to access this session right here, I could click on my takeaways right from there. I have the option to export that spreadsheet. Or if I click on this little kind of square icon view here, that's going to be my teacher dashboard view. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that. And I'm going to click on Export to Spreadsheet. And you're going to see that it will open up a Google Sheets spreadsheet. And it says all of the students, their name, collects their email, and then any response that they had for each particular slide. Something that I will note here for you is that the drawing slide, so where students were going to be drawing things, it actually doesn't show the drawing that the students gave us. It just says drawing there. So if I wanted to look back at the drawing, I would need to go back into that teacher projector view and see what's going on there if I wanted to review that kind of option later on. So this is a place where I can also access those takeaways, but I'm going to show you where you can find all of your takeaways, all of your spreadsheets for any Pear Deck presentation that you've given. So if I go into my Google Drive here, you're going to see I have a folder, Pear Deck. Now, I didn't create that folder. That automatically is created when I install Pear Deck as an add-on. If I go ahead and click on that, you're going to see I have vocabulary. That's not something we went over today, but I encourage you to take a look at that. I can access any takeaways that I have, any exports, which are my spreadsheets, and then any decks. So a deck is a Pear Deck presentation that I've opened right within Pear Deck itself, not from Google Slides. It does open it as a Google Slides, but however, that gives you a blank presentation. I personally like to take a presentation that I already have and see ways in which I can integrate those questions and templates as well. So that's definitely a great place where I can take a look at that. So let's head back to our presentation here. And before we kind of wrap up, I'm going to show us where to access some great resources about Pear Deck. So at the bottom of your video, you're going to see two different tabs. It says Discussion and Files and Links. Files and Links is where we can find all of the different resources for this Pear Deck course. You'll see how to teach a remote lesson with Pear Deck. That's a great resource if you want to integrate Google Meet for remote learning, maybe present from a different location as where your students are located. Lots of great different options there. I highly encourage you to take a look at that. Thank you so much for joining us today. I hope you learned a little bit more about how to integrate Pear Deck with your Google Slides presentation. I'd like to thank Joe for moderating.
Thanks for having me, Nikki.
Of course, and Brian behind the camera. Remember, if you'd like to receive course credit for completing today's course, be sure to take that quiz, which is located right below your screen, the yellow button there, and that survey as well. If you have any questions after this course, don't hesitate to click that Ask OTIS button at any time, and one of our team members will be sure to help that answer for you. Thanks and have a great day.